Stop! I will buy her. The words left my mouth before I gave them leave, hard and flat in the dusty air of that forgotten border town. I had been passing through, a ghost minding his own business, content to let the world fester as it saw fit. The auction was a typical affair: stolen horses, rustled cattle, and a handful of human beings treated like livestock. It was none of my concern. A man can't mend all the world's rips and tears. He'll unravel himself trying. I was turning to leave when the auctioneer shoved her forward. A native girl, thin as a willow switch, her face a mask of stone but her eyes two burning coals. The crowd jeered. Another piece of property. But then, as her wrist caught the brutal sunlight, I saw it. A small, black dragonfly tattooed on the delicate skin. Its wings were spread as if in flight, a perfect, intricate marking I had seen only once before, on the hand of a man who had pulled me from the jaws of a blizzard and wrapped me in his own blanket, knowing it meant he would freeze before the dawn. His name was Black Hawk. This was his blood. The debt I owed him was not a thing of silver or gold. It was a weight on my soul, a ghost that rode with me through every mile of empty land. A life for a life. The auctioneer's drone faded into a dull buzz. The jeering crowd disappeared. There was only the girl, the mark, and the promise I had made to a dead man's memory. The world had just become my concern. I paid with every last coin I had, a heavy sack of silver that clinked with the sound of a future I was giving away. The leader of the raiders, a greasy man with a captain's hat and yellowed teeth, counted it with a sneer. He thought I was a fool, a lonely rancher buying a moment's company. He shoved the girl toward me, her hand still bound. "Enjoy the merchandise," he chuckled, his men laughing with him. I didn't say a word. I just cut her ropes with my knife and handed it to her, handle first. Her eyes, sharp as flint, watched my every move. She took the knife. We walked away from that pit, the laughter of fools following us like a bad smell. We didn't speak as we cleared the edge of town. There were no words for a situation like this, only the language of survival. I gave her my canteen. She drank. I pointed toward the jagged peaks to the north. She nodded. Her name, I would learn, was Anaba. But for now, she was a question mark at my side, a silent partner in a bargain she hadn't made. The desert stretched out before us, a canvas of baked earth and heat haze. The raiders thought they had sold a victim. They had no idea they'd just armed a survivor. And I was no rancher. I was a man come to collect on a debt, and the interest was going to be paid in blood. This journey wasn't about rescue. It was about balancing the ledger. We moved north as the sun bled across the sky, painting the rocks in shades of rust and bone. Anaba walked with a tireless, ground-eating stride that spoke of a life lived in motion. She was the one who found the hidden spring, a trickle of life seeping from a rock face I would have missed entirely. She read the land like a book I'd only skimmed. That night, we made a cold camp in a wash, the stars so bright they looked like chips of ice. The silence between us was no longer a thing of suspicion, but of shared purpose. It was then I told her. I spoke of her father, Black Hawk. I spoke of the blizzard that had pinned my patrol in the high mountains, of how he had found me, the lone survivor, half frozen and given up for dead. He gave me his last blanket, I said to the fire I hadn't built. He saved my life. And he died for it. The dragonfly on your wrist, it was his mark. She listened, her gaze fixed on the darkness beyond our small space. When I was done, she simply reached into her boot and pulled out a small, intricately beaded pouch. From it, she took a single hawk feather and held it out to me. "His spirit watches," she said, her first words to me. "He sent you." I took the feather. A debt acknowledged. A partnership sealed. She then looked back toward the south, her eyes hardening. "They have others," she said. "My brother, Chino. They are in the place the rocks weep." She knew where they were. My mission to save one had just become a war to free them all. The place the rocks weep. A canyon, she explained, a deep, jagged scar in the earth where a spring fed a poisoned grove of cottonwoods. It was the raiders' fortress, a natural choke point that was all but impossible to assault. But Anaba had not been their captive, she had been their scout, forced to guide them through her people's lands before they betrayed her. She knew the secret ways, the goat trails and hidden ledges that no outsider could find. She drew a map in the dirt with the point of her knife, her movements precise and certain. She marked the sentry posts, the main camp, the pens where they held their prisoners. She was not just a survivor, she was an intelligence officer. My role in this was changing. I was no longer the sole agent of this debt. I was the weapon, and she was the hand that would guide it. We spent the next day preparing. I cleaned my rifle and my pistol, counting every precious round. Anaba fashioned a garrote from a strip of leather and practiced with her knife until her movements were a silent, deadly blur. We were a two-person army, preparing to invade a territory held by 30 men. The odds were a joke. But we weren't laughing. We were bound by something stronger than numbers. She fought for her blood, for her people. I fought for my soul, for the chance to wipe a single entry of red from my own internal ledger. As dusk fell, we stood on a ridge overlooking the canyon. Down below, the campfires of our enemy flickered like malevolent stars. It was a hellish place. And we were about to walk right into it. Darkness was our only ally. We descended into the canyon using a trail so narrow it was little more than a suggestion of a path, the rock scraping our sides. The air grew thick and heavy, carrying the scent of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and cheap whiskey. Anaba led the way, her bare feet making no sound on the stone. She was a ghost in her own land. She signaled a halt, pointing to a dark shape hunched on a ledge above us. A sentry. Getting past him was not an option. I motioned for her to stay put and began to climb the rock face beside the trail, my fingers searching for holes in the crumbling stone. Every movement was a risk, every dislodged pebble a potential death sentence. The sentry was overconfident, humming a tuneless dirge to himself, staring out into the vast emptiness, never thinking the threat would come from below. I pulled myself over the ledge, a shadow detaching from other shadows. He turned, his eyes widening in surprise, his mouth opening to shout an alarm that never came. My knife found its home. I lowered his body to the ground gently, the silence of the canyon unbroken. One down. Anaba was already moving, her eye scanning the path ahead. We moved like this for what felt like an eternity, a slow, tense crawl into the belly of the beast. Each campfire we passed was a small circle of danger, the guttural laughter of the raiders a reminder of the brutality that awaited us if we failed. This was not a battle of bullets and noise. It was a battle of shadows and whispers. We found them in a crude pen built against a rock wall, a small group of women and children huddled together for warmth, their faces etched with despair. Among them was a young boy, his expression defiant. Anaba's breath hitched. Chino! We had to move fast. Surprise was a candle flame, and it was about to flicker out. I used my knife to saw through the thick rope that served as a gate while Anaba moved to the prisoners, her hand over her brother's mouth, whispering urgent instructions in their tongue. One of the women began to cry, a thin, terrified sound. It was enough. A dog started barking, a frantic, furious noise that shattered the night. Suddenly, the camp erupted. Shouts echoed off the canyon walls. Lanterns flared to life. The time for stealth was over. The time for violence was now. I drew my pistol. Go! I yelled to Anaba. Get them to the North Trail. I'll hold them here. She gave me one look, a look that said everything, gratitude, fear, resolve. Then she was gone, shepherding her people into the darkness. I took cover behind a stack of stolen crates and opened fire. My first shot took out the main lantern, plunging the center of the camp back into confusing darkness. The raiders fired wildly, their bullets splintering the wood around me. I fired back, not to kill them all, but to sow chaos, to be a bigger threat than the fleeing prisoners. To buy them time. Every second I stayed alive was another foot of distance they gained. The debt to Black Hawk was being paid, one bullet at a time. The escape was a running gunfight through a nightmare landscape of rock and shadow. I fell back from position to position, using the raiders' own camp for cover, making them pay for every inch of ground. But there were too many of them. They began to flank me, their movements growing more coordinated as the initial shock wore off. I was running low on ammunition, my pistol feeling light in my hand. Just as 3 of them pinned me down, their bullets chewing up the rock in front of my face, a series of shapes detached from the darkness on the canyon rim above. It was Anaba and the others. But they weren't just fleeing. She had armed the other women with rocks and heavy branches. On her signal, they unleashed an avalanche of stone down upon the men who were trapping me. The raiders scattered in confusion, one man screaming as a boulder crushed his leg. The barrage gave me the opening I needed. I sprinted into the darkness, following the echo of Anaba's call, and scrambled up the trail after them. We didn't stop. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs were numb, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind us. We had done it. We had pulled the thorn from the lion's paw. But the lion was now awake, and it was angry. We had won the battle, but the war for survival had just begun. The open desert offered no place to hide. They would hunt us. For 2 days, we ran. The captain and what was left of his horde were relentless, a pack of wolves on our trail. Their horses gave them an advantage we couldn't match. We were tired, thirsty, and slowed by the children. Anaba, however, was in her element. She led us through terrain designed to break a horse's leg, over ground that left no tracks, doubling back on our trail to confuse them. She was buying us time, but we all knew it was running out. On the 3rd day, we saw the dust cloud of their pursuit on the horizon. They had found us. There was no more running. Here, Anaba said, pointing to a narrow box canyon, a dead end with high, sheer walls. We make our stand. It looked like a trap. A tomb. But I saw the tactical genius in it. It was a funnel. They could only come at us a few at a time. We had minutes. I positioned the women and children at the back of the canyon, armed with the rocks they could find. I gave Anaba my pistol. I kept the rifle. We found what little cover we could on either side of the entrance. We were no longer the hunted. We were the bait. We were turning their aggression, their overconfidence, into a weapon against them. I laid the hawk feather Anaba had given me on a rock beside me. A reminder of the debt. A prayer to a dead man's spirit. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, the thunder of our judgment approaching. They entered the canyon with arrogant confidence, whooping and firing their guns into the air. They saw us as cornered animals, their final victory just moments away. That was their first mistake. My first rifle shot took the captain's horse out from under him. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. The charge faltered. Anaba's pistol barked from the other side of the entrance, and another rider fell. The canyon, which they had seen as a killing ground, became a gauntlet of death. Their numbers were useless in the narrow confines. The fight was brutal, close, and personal. It was a maelstrom of noise, smoke, and desperation. When my rifle ran empty, I used it as a club. Anaba fired with a cold, methodical precision, each shot finding its mark. The women and children rained rocks down from above, creating chaos, turning the canyon floor into a treacherous landscape. The hunters had become the prey, caught in a trap of their own making. The last raider I faced was the captain himself. He came at me with a knife, his face a mask of crazed fury. My own knife met his. We fought in the dust, 2 men locked in a primal struggle. But he was fighting for greed. I was fighting for a promise. My blade found his heart. He fell at my feet, the dust settling around him in a red-brown stain. Silence descended on the canyon, a profound, ringing quiet broken only by the ragged sound of our own breathing. It was over. The sun was setting when we reached the edge of the Painted Hills, the traditional border of Anaba's homeland. Her people were safe. Her brother was safe. We stopped, the small band of survivors looking toward the familiar shapes of their sacred lands. Home. Anaba turned to me. The fire in her eyes had been replaced by a deep, quiet calm. She held out her hand, not in a plea or a gesture of thanks, but as an equal. In it was the knife I had given her back at the auction. "Keep it," I said. "You'll have more use for it than I will." She nodded once, a gesture of profound, unspoken understanding. There was nothing more to say. A debt had been paid. A ledger balanced. She took the hawk feather from my hatband and replaced it with a small, blue jay feather. "For the journey ahead," she said. I watched them walk into the hills, their forms shrinking until they were swallowed by the twilight. I turned my horse south and rode away, a solitary figure once more. The ghost that had ridden with me for so long was finally at peace. So sleep easy tonight, friends, and when you see a dragonfly skim the water or hear a hawk's cry on the wind, remember that even in the harshest of lands, debts are honored. And some men, no matter how lost, will always ride toward the flicker of a promise, even if it leads them straight into the heart of the fire.